All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. Appreciate it. Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Zeb Evans, founder, CEO of ClickUp. Thanks for taking time today, Zeb. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Luke.
Absolutely. So we're avid users of ClickUp, so we're super excited about this. I think everybody's been looking forward to it. So looking forward to digging in here today. Just to quickly introduce Zeb. Zeb's obviously the founder CEO of ClickUp. Zeb is also a college dropout like me, which I love. Achieved unicorn status, 6 months ago, 12, something like that. And just seeing crazy hyper growth. So, really looking forward to digging in here. I love it, Zeb, if you don't mind, just kicking it off with kind of the founding origination story, and then talking a little bit about the growth that you all seen in a really short amount of time.
Yeah, happy to. So I kind of taking it back to where the problem arose for me was we were working on, I had my first, I don't want to say tech company, but we had some tech with it, but it wasn't a true tech company. It was my first real company. And it started with just me, and I used Basecamp to organize my work. And then we ended up with 60 or 70 people probably 4 or 5 years later. And we still use Basecamp, but we also use Jira for engineering. We had Asana for marketing and for lists, and Trello for boards. We had To-Do's for reminders. We had Google Calendars. We had Google Docs. We had Google Sheets. We had a marketing approval software. We had Skype and Slack. And so when we had Confluence for docs and knowledge bases, so it was like this, it was this mess of productivity platform software, which was the whole goal, was saving you time. And so we couldn't help but think that this was wasting our time. And so flash forward about a year or two later, I moved out to Silicon Valley. And I'm from North Carolina originally. So we kind of drove across the country, did that whole thing. And when we got there, we were going to build a Craigslist competitor where we could pay in-app and remove the sketchiness from Craigslist. Craigslist at the time was the largest source of internal fraud in the United States. And so that was what we were going to solve. Before we did, we wanted to build a platform where we could put all of our work in one place and not have to use separate different pieces of software for project management and productivity. And so that's where ClickUp started. We started as an internal tool. And really quickly, like 4 to 6 weeks after we got started, we knew that there was a lot more to be done here, and that this was the thing that we were going to build for the public also. And so that's kind of the same as it is today. As far as the vision's the same as it is today. As far as growth goes, we've seen a ton of growth the past couple of years. And just before COVID, we were about a year and a half ago, we were 60 people, and today we're almost 700. So we've seen a lot of growth during the past year and a half, and a lot of stuff that breaks down during that, a lot of challenges during that, but we're still holding everything together.
I love it. So you really started building it as an internal tool. What was that like? Kind of, we debate that sometimes, is do we want to go out and just purchase third-party software or actually build something internally? So how did you kind of balance building something with trying to build this Craigslist competitor? And at what point did you really say, screw that idea, like we're going all in here? You said 4 to 6 weeks, but like what clicked that caused that to happen?
Well, I think naively we thought we'd be able to build it in 4 or 6 weeks. And we got 4 or 6 weeks into it and realized there's a ton more to do. But also just like I'm very passionate about saving time. I've had 4 near-death experiences. And so I always just am that person that's like instilling that life is short. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. We have to do what we can while we're on this planet. And so saving time and efficiency has always been like my number one passion. So, that was why we did it as an internal tool too. I don't think we would have done that if I wasn't so adamant about efficiency and productivity. So I think that's probably the big reason why we chose to build that one. Now I look on build versus buy scenarios, like every one of them is different, but every time you choose to buy, there are trade-offs. You don't control things as much. It's a lot more implementation than you think it's going to be. And every time you choose build, it takes a lot longer and it's more complex and there's more maintenance than you're going to be. So it's like there isn't really always a win-win when it comes to choosing build versus buy.
Awesome, super helpful. And your team has just been blitzing marketing, like the fastest I think I've ever seen it. I woke up one day and I swear there was ClickUp everywhere, all over San Diego. And I would walk my dog with my girlfriend and I'd say, oh, look, it's Zeb's company. And she's like, that's just in San Diego, right? I'm like, no, it's not. And we were flying to North Carolina because she's from there too. and it was we had to stop in Atlanta, and it was all over the Atlanta airport. And I looked at her and said, see, I told you. So like, who's in these commercials on LinkedIn that are hilarious? Like, what's the marketing strategy, and how have you guys just been so effective in getting the brand out just rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, in general, brand marketing strategy is to just make our brand more well known. So there's only one way to measure that, really. It's brand awareness, and there are surveys that can be done and percentage of people. And so we go to different cities that have a relatively decent tech population. Doesn't always have to be tech, because our demographic isn't just tech, but we find that those cities actually work better than others. But point I'm getting to is that you go to those, we measure brand awareness. If we're low there, we blitz it with out-of-home advertising. And digital advertising. And then after 2 to 3 months, we'll remeasure it. And if we increase a lot, we'll actually continue, or we'll double down. So if we're increasing, we're actually continuing and placing larger bets. It's when we stop increasing, when we're paying, is when we pull out of a city, or an airport, or whatever that may be. So that's kind of the general philosophy behind brand marketing. And paid acquisition is separate for us. There are two kind of separate departments, separate missions and goals.
What's most effective for y'all right now?
On the brand marketing side, it's hard to measure. So you can really only look at it holistically. It's, there are tools out there that claim to be able to measure this stuff, but we haven't found any that work really well. So we just look holistically on what works. I mean, as far as like what is very efficient for us, use of funds, billboards, believe it or not, are pretty efficient depending on the city. And like in San Francisco, billboards are the most efficient use of a dollar.
But in terms of like the paid side, right, where you guys, I know we talked about it at dinner a couple of months ago, where you said it's totally, once you figure out the machine, it just starts firing. I assume that's the best channel for y'all.
Oh, absolutely. On paid acquisition, that's the most important. That's why we look at it as two completely separate things. But on paid acquisition channels, Google is always going to be number one, I think, in everybody's book. The problem with Google is it isn't fully scalable. Once you get to a certain point, there's only a certain amount of people that are searching search terms. And so you'll start, kind of using all of that. And then you have to choose other channels. YouTube for us is working pretty well. Facebook works well also. And then those review platforms, things like Capterra work really well as well.
Awesome. And then, on the sales side, kind of, obviously you guys are doing very much a kind of a freemium land and then expand as people leverage more and more capabilities. When I was looking at like Monday.com's S1 and others, and Jason Lemkin at Sasser talks about this all the time, is that, as you guys get bigger, you start implementing the whole enterprise sales force, right? How do you go top down at bigger organizations? Have you gotten to that point yet where you're pushing a lot of B2B, or what's the breakdown in terms of freemium clients like CourseKey, who kind of scaled up internally till the whole company started leveraging it, versus, you're just trying to go after, bigger deals, bigger companies?
Yeah, today we're about 50-50 sales assisted versus self-service. So sales assisted usually is going to be larger companies, not necessarily all enterprises. There's still some S and SMBs and still small businesses, medium-sized businesses. But the sales assisted motion is largely one that is either top down or it's bottoms up, but has to go through a procurement process at a larger company, or we're rolling up several teams into one enterprise-wide license adoption. So we started building sales out relatively recently. About a year ago is when we started building our sales assisted motion out. And I think in software in general, it can be seen, especially product-led growth companies, there can be hesitance toward rolling out sales. But for us, it's been phenomenal. The reality is there are people probably like you and I that don't want a salesperson to really contact us, right? We just would rather have a self-service experience. But there's actually a lot of people that do want a salesperson contacting them. They want somebody to hold their hand through the process. And that's why you have to build sales assisted.
Awesome. Super helpful. It's so interesting because we've been playing around with that, internally at CourseKey, and we go back and forth definitely on it, but fascinating. So appreciate that. If we had to kind of drill into, well, before I get there, you're probably in the most hyper competitive market in software in the world right now. Like, how do you guys stand out? How how do you get ahead of the competition? You got Monday.com, you got Basecamp, right? Like it's to some extent you're competing with Google and Microsoft as well with their Office suites. Like what's the core driver to beating them out?
Your only defensibility in software is how fast you ship software, because everybody, let's call it 5 years down the road, is going to take what you have, and it will be in other products, even if they're not even competitive. So you just have to stay ahead of the competition. You've got to stay a year or two ahead, and you've got to ship faster than they do. So I mean, at the end of the day, again, software, it's about how fast you can iterate, how fast you can improve. But from a competitive perspective, that's what we've seen a lot of. If you look at Monday's product a year or two ago, it's nothing like it is today. And frankly, they have copied a lot of the stuff that we have done, and that was something that I worried about from the beginning. A couple of years ago when we didn't have funding. I'm like, how are we going to defend ourselves against this heavily funded company that is just copying everything that we do? The reality is you can always still stay, again, you can stay a year ahead, you can stay 2 years ahead, and it's okay if they copy you after that. And so there isn't as much of a worry there as I used to think that there is. Now, the other point though is that it's very hard to get into this category, and it is very hard to get into this category. But once you're in, you have a path that you can carve out. And we have several of those that we've been able to carve out against competitors, even just like the engineering vertical. Usually you use Jira, and we went head to head. We won 95% head to head against Jira the past 60 days. And our other competitors in this industry can't do that yet. So you got to be reactive also, and you got to see what works. And as soon as you know something is working, something like the Jira case, which we honestly didn't think would work as well as it does today, then we just change our resources to go really heavy on Jira. And you just got to be really reactive when it comes to go to market.
We're a perfect example of actually moving from Jira to ClickUp on the engineering side. So fascinating to hear. And one of the things, just to play into that, like you're maniacally focused on product, right? You're a very product focused CEO. You talked to me about that. You spend a ton of time there. One of the things that stood out in our conversation was you're trying to ship something every single week. So it plays into that fact, like, speed is everything for y'all. Like, can you talk a little bit more about your thesis or philosophy there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when prefacing this is that we always are believers in this natural product-led growth, meaning you listen to customers, you release features, and you listen to customers again, and you iterate on those features. And so it's just this hyper sensitive feedback cycle of really, really deeply listening to what people want and what people need, and then shipping software fast. When you do that, you're able to skip a lot of the steps that usually are in software development process, like a ton of UX research, a ton of product management and development, and you really can just wing it, honestly. And when you wing it, then you can listen to customers and you can fix it really quickly if you made a mistake. But most of the time, you actually do things right on your gut instinct, your intuition, as long as you have great people that are doing it. And so I think we've just cut out a lot of the fat when it comes to software development in general. And again, that's when we've been that maniacal focus on shipping product is because we're in a very, very competitive industry. And so when you can iterate really quickly, it also just allows, your users become avid fans of the product because you're iterating quickly, you're listening to them, you're adding more features, there's new stuff. On the flip side, there's that 5% of people that don't want anything new, right? They want everything to remain the same. And so you've got to balance that a little bit.
Awesome. Super helpful. So let's talk about some of the challenges or the war stories, if we can. Obviously you guys have been up and to the right incredibly fast. I think probably, I don't know if you have that chart where you look at all the biggest software companies and how fast they grow. I think you're on a similar clip right now, but like where are the war stories? Like what are 2 or 3 things that people don't know about that happened at ClickUp where, you said, holy crap, like we gotta fix this, or we gotta turn this around quickly to get back on pace?
Yeah, I think one was probably 2.5 years ago or so, maybe 3 years ago. And so we were bootstrapped at first, and I'm coming from North Carolina. I thought you're not accustomed to raising funds. And I was always skeptical of venture capital. And so we were bootstrapped, and we essentially were probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 people. And, I had saved up some money to fund some costs, but we were running out of money. And we really just had another month after that current month left of cash. And so I was completely focused on product at the time. I was the only product person. I really was the only product person until about a year ago. And I loved it. Don't get me wrong, but I needed to pull my head out and see look on the marketing side, look on the sales side, look on paywalls. And so I did stop doing product, started focusing on where can we put paywalls in? How can we, operationalize our plans and make them more attractive to customers? Let's start adding some promotions. We start sending out, promo codes and things like that. And literally by the end of that next month, we weren't very profitable, but we were break even and we were making a little bit of money. And so it goes just again with that philosophy of being reactive. You've got to know where the problems are and then solve them. I think at the end of the day, how fast you grow is based on how fast you can solve problems. And so we've got lots of stories around those paywalls type of things. But I mean, I think a more recent one was back in December of last year. We started scaling really, really, really quickly. We didn't think we just were not anticipating the type of growth that we had. And I don't think you should. To be clear, I don't think software companies should overthink growth and overthink architecture and try to write the code. At the end of the day, you've got to get the product there first, product market fit first, and you can fix all of that stuff later with more resources. But we knew this was going to happen at some point because we didn't have the best architecture. And so we started scaling really quickly, and there were a lot of database problems. There were a lot of server issues that we were experiencing with amount of scale, things like slow speeds and servers going down. And so, we had to immediately create these tiger teams of the best people that we could find to solve these problems. And we did, but it took a month. It took really probably 3 months until we were in a good place. But it took a month of customers really having to bear with us and deal with a lot of problems that we were having. But we solved those. And so, the point is that I don't like to worry too much about things like what could happen in the future. I like to be a little bit more reactive when it comes to software development.
Awesome. Very interesting. So you were you said 60 people like 18 months ago or 12 months ago?
6D. We were 6D people about 18 months ago.
Okay. So 60 to 700 in 18 months. Like how are you managing the people side of this, the culture side of this? Like that's insane amount of injection. We went from 30 to 70 this year, and I think we're feeling it just from a process, systems, onboarding, enablement perspective. Like excuse my French, how the hell are you managing that?
This one was probably where we could have been a little bit more proactive. I mean, I wish somebody would have told us that you need HR and legal. We didn't really know. Those are the two functions that honestly, as a startup founder and even just in a startup in general, like you don't see those things coming. You're like, that seems like such a large company thing where we would need HR and legal. But those two things really matter. And so those things I would have had a lot. I would have put them in place a lot earlier in order to scale. So we ran into problems, and we hired the people that are solve those problems, things like HR and legal, but also recruiting. Recruiting is, we used to use only recruiters for recruiting, and that's not scalable. And so we have an in-house recruiting team now. We have a chief people officer now who she was head of talent at Netflix for 7 years. So she's really been able to operationalize like the top of the funnel recruiting process through onboarding and retaining employees. So I mean, when you're doing it early on, until we were like 250 employees, we're just kind of winging it, and I think that's fine to do. But once you get to 250, like you got to bring in those people from the outside that have done it before and really know how to prevent the problems that you're going to experience.
Awesome. So what is that kind of, what does your core team look like today? How are you ranking out functions, roles? Is there 10 people on the management team? What departments are they leading? How are you guys structured?
Yeah, I have like 12 direct reports, and 9 of them are leadership positions. And so then each of those 9 leaders are kind of your core functions. But I mean, holistically, when you look at it, we have revenue, which is broken down into sales, and marketing and solutions and implementations and everything that's serve for the customer. And then we have customer experience, which is going to be onboarding, it's success, it is customer support, it's our coaching program, which is real-time like coaching where you can talk to a coach. And then we have EPD, engineering, product design, and those kind of three departments are the big departments in our. Of course, you have to have finance, and you got to have legal also, and operations, and kind of that rolls up into operations and ClickUp.
Okay. So, a couple minutes left here, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. But like, top of mind, favorite experience that happened at ClickUp. What was it? How did you get there?
There's been a lot of those. I think you got to celebrate along the way. You got to enjoy the process, because the problem with, I think, just business in general, and really just life in general, is that your goalpost always moves. And so if you're very motivated, somebody that enjoys growth, you set a target, you hit it, and then you move the goalpost back. But it's important to really take time and celebrate each of those wins. And so, of course, those huge milestones are our fundraising announcements, for sure. A huge milestone was when we got to 500 employees. We really celebrated that one too. And to your point, it's hard when you scale to really create that same culture and that connection, especially during COVID, when everybody's remote. But you just have to be intentional about it. And that's what we've tried to do, is be very intentional about maintaining that culture and making sure that everyone has fun while they're at work and enjoys what they're doing.
That's awesome. And are you doing hybrid? You guys just got a big office space. Are you doing, like, are people moving down to San Diego, or are you doing kind of a mix, fully remote?
Yeah, we've got about like 35% of people in San Diego. We have another 20% or so in Salt Lake City, 10-15% in the Bay Area, and then the rest of the company's spread out everywhere. So we're kind of doing a hybrid approach, where we have a headquarters here, obviously, and then we have a headquarters in Salt Lake City. And right now, during we don't require everybody to come in, but we ask that people come in Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and the office is open the rest of the week also, if people want to come in. And about 90% of people in San Diego do come in to the office now.
That's great. So, it's fascinating to think about, but you guys have just cranked up valuation very, very rapidly. We're pushing heavily to hit a big valuation for our Series C next year. Is there any, like, 2 to 3 kind of key nuggets or areas of focus or things that you'd emphasize for us to drill in and attack to make sure that we hit that, similar to you all did?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, I think at the end of the day, what software investors really care about are 2 things. They care about ARR, and then they care about net dollar retention. And so for valuations, those are the 2 things that you're going to get valued on. We learned early on, not really early on, actually, just like several months ago, that we were charging revenue for ProServe, for professional services. Investors don't care about professional services.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid. It sounds like well, they only care about ARR, but the reality is what they're valuing on is this recurring revenue that they're going to receive in perpetuity, forever, essentially, assuming that you have low churn. And so that's what investors really care about when it comes to valuations, is that growth, and the ARR growth, and then that net dollar retention, making sure it's above 100%. With every dollar that comes in, including churn, including expenses, eventually it will grow larger than what it came in at.
So we have the same, I kind of speak that same line into the business. I think people probably are sick of me continuing to push that, but it's true. Everybody focuses on annual recurring revenue, right? And the growth of that, right? They want to see that continuously stack up and stack up and stack up. So if we, just to play off that, because I get this question a lot, I always say that we all own ARR. Every single person at the company owns ARR in some way, shape, or form. How do you emphasize that to someone that doesn't necessarily have a direct hand in it? Maybe somebody, or a very clear output of it. Maybe somebody in product or engineering, or even in support in some respect. How do you kind of drill into folks that, hey, this is our key metric, this is really important to us, this is how you directly contribute to that, when you're not a salesperson or a marketing person, or even someone who's focused on expansion?
We have multiple top line goals, because I think you're right. Not everybody can focus on that stuff, or at least can have an direct impact on like top line ARR growth. So we have other things, like we have weekly active users as another top line goal. We have saving people time as a top line goal, which is I think somebody asked us what it's measured by, and right now in product teams measure it by how many products that they use, with the thesis being that if you're using more than multiple products in one place, you're saving time from switching between those platforms. We actually are doing study. We did a qualitative study already about how much we save people time. That's why we're able to say that save one day every week. Tagline, but we're doing more like an actual quantitative survey now that's more scientific as well. It just takes a really long time. And so those three things are stuff that we look at. And so if you can align to one, then you would align to the other. But ultimately, they all, they're all relying on each other. They're if you're not growing weekly active users and we're not saving people time, then our ARR isn't going to grow as well.
Got it. Awesome. Very helpful. Well, just to I want to turn it over to the audience for questions, but any kind of closing thoughts or comments before we do here, kind of rapid fire, a couple minutes?
Let's do it. Let's do Q&A.
All right, let's do it. So Mark just threw in the chat, who is responsible for collecting client feedback and prioritizing it for development?
Product ops team now. Early on, though, we just used Canny, which is our kind of feedback board platform, and that itself is the source of feedback. So you can aggregate it, and people can vote on features. They comment on that, and I read every single piece of feedback in there for a very long time. And so I would encourage who's ever running product to read every single piece of feedback from the customers. We also would take that even from support tickets and sales. We would take that stuff and put it in Canny as our source of truth. And so today, product ops, we kind of built an in-house tool for it, but product ops ingests data from those sources, but also from social media, also from actual customer emails, customer phone calls when we're using Gong, things like that, and kind of it distills it in one place for us.
Awesome. Thank you. So speaking of goal, this is from Anthony, our VP engineering. Speaking of goalposts at CourseKey, we're getting familiar with ClickUp's goals. We use OKRs internally, so he's curious if you guys use OKRs internally, and if so, how are you kind of structuring that to be most effective within ClickUp?
Yeah, honestly, our goals features it's not that advanced right now. We've actually been working on it the past 2 or 3 months, but it won't be released until probably November, December. We actually use goals. I can't believe I'm saying this, but we use goals as a template in a list and folder within ClickUp. And I'm happy to share that template with you guys if it's helpful. I think we throw it somewhere because our current goals feature doesn't do as much as we need it to do in order for us to run our OKRs. And so we use a template. Lots of our enterprise customers use the same template where it rolls things up and you're able to really track them in a much better way than what our current product has. But we will have that goals V2 in November, hopefully.
The thing that I love that you guys do too, that helps so much, I'm sure, from a product standpoint, is you use your own product every single day internally, right? And Paul Graham from Y Combinator says that all the time. He says using the product internally is only going to make it better because everything that's painful you're going to deal with firsthand. So I'm assuming, you're in there all the time and that helps you identify that the goals feature is not where it should be. So super interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. Question from Wayne. Any books that you recommend that helped you get to kind of where you are now?
The Slide Edge is one that we actually make every employee read when they onboard, and it's a pretty quick read, and it's really just about compounding. Small changes compounding over time make a big difference. Instead of thinking about let's go, we get this huge daunting initiative we want to start, just start a little bit of it, do it a little bit of a day, and it gets easier and easier, and stuff just really compounds over time. That's probably our favorite one here.
1% growth every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, and then last question, and again, thanks for going a couple minutes over here. What were the biggest challenges during the rapid hiring spree, and what would you recommend us not doing that potentially you guys had stumbled through?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big piece of this during COVID also was maintaining culture, and so you really just can't settle on culture when you're hiring people, even if they're those leaders that have the real big accolades and the big names behind them. You've got to screen for culture still, and so we made a couple of those mistakes early on, and then fixed them really quickly. And so I think that if you can maintain that culture as you scale, like everything else kind of fixes itself. It really does. It sounds simple, but the biggest problems you're going to have are culture problems. And so as long as you avoid those, scaling becomes a lot easier. Now, with that said, there's things you got to put into place. And again, it's up to HR and legal to do that stuff. And once you start, getting to a couple hundred employees, a lot of time is spent managing HR stuff, just basic questions around benefits, payroll, issues that happen with payroll, just random HR things in general. And so I think definitely a lesson learned is hiring dedicated HR and dedicated legal earlier on than we would have.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being here, Zeb. Any closing thoughts, any words of wisdom outside of the incredible things you shared for the team today?
I think my biggest words of wisdom is just understanding that everyone is winging it. Everyone is just figuring it out as we go. And so I used to think from the outside, you see these huge tech companies and huge name entrepreneurs that I always felt that they had a bunch of guidance, a bunch of advisors. They knew the path to take, and it's just not the case. I talked to them over and over again, and everyone is just figuring out as we go. And so things can feel on fire, but that's part of the ride. It's part of the journey, and it's all about enjoying the process.
Awesome. Zeb Evans, thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate you being here, and keep it going. Keep killing it. We love the product, and we're looking forward to seeing where y'all go. So appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks so much. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, Zeb. Bye.